So you're probably addicted to this and you don't even know. Or rather, let me say, welcome to Passion Movement. But yeah, as the title of the episode says, you're probably addicted to this, and what I'm talking about is dopamine, right? This is the real epidemic, I would say, of the world, really of the Western society mainly, is this addiction that we all have to dopamine. And when I say dopamine, I really mostly mean instant gratification and receiving instant pleasure from whatever it may be, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be drugs or alcohol, but just about anything that produces us instant pleasure in our lives, and just about all of us are addicted to it, right? The metric that we use, really the researchers use to measure instant gratification, right? This is referring to things that you do rather quickly and receive that pleasure chemical of dopamine in your brain, and you feel content, you feel satisfied for the moment, and you no longer have to worry, stress, or really overcome anything else. You can get dopamine and, instant dopamine really from just about anything these days, whether it's, like I said, drugs, alcohol, social media, porn, talking to your friends, video games, food, really anything. And it doesn't have to be commonplace things, right? Maybe you are someone who receives their instant dopamine from reading a certain type of book or watching TV shows, maybe even exercising, right? Maybe not exercise. But, the reason it's so important is, for the most part, if we really go back in history and look at the way that humans live their lives, dopamine is an essential chemical for us to live, right? We can't live without dopamine, and this is the same chemical that's released in your pleasure, pain, reward center in your head, in your brain. It's released when we feel good. It's really released when we anticipate feeling good and, in fact, receive that. And so when we look back in history, what we find is that, for the most part, humans had to work for their dopamine. Humans had to endure some level of pain, some level of discomfort, in order to then get long-term satisfaction from something, whether it's achieving a goal or creating something, or really just very overarchingly receive and endure some type of pain in order to then receive a reward at the end. And that's really how we've lived for, millennia, centuries, whatever. And this new wave of people becoming reliant on comfort in their lives, especially in the Western society, everything is done for our comfort. Most of, capitalism and the way that we live our lives, these are products that are given to us for us to be more comfortable, for us to endure less pain to receive what we want. And, as great as that sounds, that now we have all these different things that are allowing us to stay in our comfort zone, that are allowing us to endure less pain to receive pleasure, it's really become something of an epidemic in our society, really. The way that the pleasure-pain really sector of your brain works is, it works like a pendulum, right? If you think a pendulum or even a swing when you would have at a playground where one person sits on one side and the other person sits on the other, that's really how your pleasure pain works in your brain. And so when you press really hard on the pleasure side, you have to balance out the equilibrium, and your brain naturally wants to balance out that equilibrium. And so what's on the other side is pain. Is when we receive a certain amount of pleasure, we are going to also experience after that a certain amount of pain, really an equal amount of pain, because we want to once again balance out that pendulum, get to equilibrium within our minds, right? We're going to release certain chemicals in order to feel that way, right? You could see that with withdrawal or cravings. Those are the chemicals of pain being released in response to the deep pleasure that was pressed on the pendulum. And so this is why we see so many people now more and more becoming addicted to things. And it's easy to see addiction as drugs and alcohol and just destructive behavior, but what we fail to miss often is that in society now, it's just about anything that produces us instant gratification, anything that produces us this mass degree of comfort that is just as addicting, if not more. And so we're all addicted to some way, shape, or form to instant gratification, whatever, that course is for you. And the reason I'm really talking about this and why I'm making a whole episode about this is the importance of understanding this and why you should maybe consider doing something about this. It really doesn't matter much what it is that you're particularly doing with your life, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're working a job, you're in school, you're just kind of chilling. Whatever it is that you're doing, this addiction to dopamine, this addiction to instant gratification is having some type of repercussion on your life. When we receive instant gratification, we feel pleasure instantly without really doing much work. We very quickly lose our drive, but very, very quickly lose our, I don't like the word motivation, but, motivation, we lose that too. To really do anything of substance with our lives, to do anything that fuels us truly. If I'm receiving dopamine now, if I'm receiving pleasure now instantly, if I can go open my phone, go on social media, and feel good right away, why would I really put myself through some type of pain, put myself through some type of discomfort in order to, then receive pleasure later on, when I can get it now, with less work, with less pain? And that's really how our society has been for the last few decades now, and it's really gearing up more and more and more, right? The more things that you see on the market being put out, everything is just geared towards comfort and less pain and less work, right? Less work for us to do, less pain and discomfort for us to endure. And when we're kind of stuck on these cycles, because that's what it is, we get stuck in these cycles of instant gratification. How often do you see, or maybe you've experienced this yourself, I've definitely went through this, where if you go out one night and you're partying or you're just celebrating whatever you're doing, right, and you have one drink, you really plan to have 1-2 drinks, but then you feel so good and you're like, oh, I could smoke now, now I can do this and this and that. And then you get into these cycles of just the more pleasure and the more really instant pleasure that you're receiving, the more you start craving. Because the more that you press down on that pendulum, right, that pleasure-pain pendulum within your brain, the more you're going to start feeling more and more pain, and you're going to counteract that with just, keep funneling, keep producing more pleasure to remove the potential pain that you have to see, rather witness. And I would argue that it's really quite unnatural for us to be living in these states and these cycles, these patterns of constantly chasing dopamine, not because it necessarily feels good, but really for the most part is because we're just avoiding pain. It's not necessarily that we love the pleasure and we love the feeling of dopamine, which we definitely do. But the more that we get trapped in these cycles and patterns, it really comes down to us just avoiding pain at that point. And it really gets to a point that dopamine is kind of taking over your life. Instant gratification is now the biggest driving force of the actions that you're going to take, the thoughts that you're going to have, the things that you're going to do. And here's why it's so important, right? Regardless of what you're doing with your life, whether you have big goals or dreams, or whether you're just kind of chilling, whatever you're doing, right? You're not going to want to do anything, really, if it's not necessarily bringing you instant pleasure in some way, shape, or form. And, if you're someone who's really kind of been following your own intuition, following what it is that you want to do with your life, you've come to those places or points, those checkpoints in your life where you have to do the uncomfortable thing, and you have to put yourself and endure some type of pain, because that long-term result is going to be worth it. That long-term fulfillment will be worth the discomfort and the pain that you feel now. And so if you're stuck in this dopamine cycle, it's very hard to get to that point of getting yourself to do those things. And I think this ties in beautifully with the last episode, talking about, really living authentically for yourself and living what's true to you. And when we're really following these almost animalistic instincts to chase the dopamine and chase the instant gratification, we take away the power from us. We really no longer are in control. We are no longer following really our intuition and what it is that's authentic to us, because rather what we're following is this chase and pursuit of dopamine, this chase and pursuit of instant pleasure. And one way to counteract this, and it's definitely a little bit more on the extreme side, is doing a dopamine detox, right? Now, when I say dopamine detox, I don't mean remove all dopamine, because obviously we need dopamine in our lives. We need it to function. We need our body to move, and it moves through the release of dopamine. But just detoxing from the instant dopamine, the instant gratification, the instant pleasure that we receive dopamine from. These are things like social media, drugs, alcohol, video games, and you know your own vice. I can sit here and name a whole bunch of different things that produce instant gratification, but as you're listening to this, I'm sure that you know whatever it is that you're doing in your life that is probably not beneficial to you in any way, shape, or form, and probably even harmful to you. And yet you keep doing this and you keep going in these cycles because it feels so good in the moment. And the repercussions are so far away that the pleasure now overtakes it. And so what can you do with a dopamine detox is really just try to remove as many of these instant gratifiers out of your life as you can, right? If you are someone whose dopamine fill comes from social media and maybe junk food or things like that, remove those things. And as we've said before, right, we have this pendulum in our head. We have this pleasure-pain pendulum. When you remove those things, when you remove that instant pleasure sources that you're probably, inducing in constantly every day, you're going to start to experience a whole lot more pain. And that's really where a dopamine detox becomes a little bit slightly extreme, because if you have a whole lot of dopamine that you're consuming from a whole lot of different sources, removing all those will definitely put you in a deep state of discomfort. But, if this is something that is resonating with you and you feel like would really have an impact on your life, definitely try it. Do it for a week. Do it for 3 days. And see how much your life changes, right? When I did my first dopamine detox, I really removed everything from my life. And it's important to note here, I'm going to interject a little bit. When you're removing all these instant gratifiers, you're going to really want to help yourself and implement some other dopamine sources that are not just instant pleasure. This is things like going for a walk, going out in nature, creating something, right? Expressing yourself, going to the gym. All of these different things release dopamine for us as well, but we have to go through some physical discomfort to experience them. And they're also what we call natural sources, right? We don't need a certain product or something man-made, whatever it is, to experience dopamine from exercising, to experience dopamine from going out in nature and taking a hike and seeing these beautiful views. And so you really want to start kind of putting those in there while you're doing your dopamine detox. It'll not only make it easier, but also make you feel phenomenal. It's going to make you feel phenomenal because you're going to feel the huge rush of not just dopamine, but endorphins while you're in this kind of withdrawal phase, while you're feeling that pain of the removal of your instant dopamine. And so when you go through this detox and you really start to incorporate natural sources of dopamine in your life and not allow your brain to win, because that's really what's happening is when we're addicted to dopamine, which again, probably all of us, right? Most, if not all, we are all addicted to this dopamine, to this instant gratification. And so one of the most pivotal things that changed for me when I first did my first detox, I think it was probably a year and a half ago now, was that I recognized how many things it is that I really want to do with my life. How many things I'm really invigorated to go and create and build and excite me. And I didn't see these things, right? Because I was blinded by the instant pleasure that I was constantly consuming. I was in this haze. We're really kind of all in this haze of just being like little rats on wheels, not to get too morbid here. But we're so stuck in this haze of instant dopamine that we don't even see of what's true to us, what do we want to do. And so once we really kind of detox, it'll help you see those things that excite you, that you want to do with your life, because you don't have to now take action and have certain thoughts and certain beliefs and do these certain things that are providing you instant dopamine, because you're literally removing it. Are you gonna have cravings? Absolutely. It's not gonna be an easy couple days, weeks, however long you do this for. Like, it really will be a challenge to remove these instant gratifiers. But in order for you to get to, if this is resonating with you, in order for you to get to that place that you're trying to get to, like, this is such a pivotal step that you have to take. And just recognizing, what am I addicted to? It's dopamine for sure, but like, what specific actions am I taking that are providing me this dopamine that I'm addicted to, and what can I change? You don't have to remove them forever. If you're someone whose vice is watching lots of Netflix, I'm not saying never watch Netflix again, but certainly, scale down on it. The time that you have spent not in the presence, not really in the intoxication of this instant gratification, your brain will start creating these new neural pathways, because you're going to be in a state of boredom, and you're going to start finding new things to do, and you're going to get excited for them. The pain part of the pendulum is going to be pressed down a little bit more than usual, and so once you find things that excite you, the pleasure that you're going to get from them is so much greater than if you were pressing on the pleasure side already. If I'm sitting in a haze of dopamine and I'm really going through this cycle, and someone presents to me this opportunity to do this amazing thing that I love, I'm not going to be as excited to do that thing if I'm in this haze of dopamine, because I'm already so comfortable. I'm already in so much pleasure. Why go do this thing? Yes, it's going to feel good if I go do this thing, but why go do it if I have this, instant pleasure in front of me? And so it's really, really a pivotal thing to detox yourself from dopamine, and definitely not just once. And it's not an easy thing to do, and I'm certainly not advocating that you go put yourself through pain, but try it out, right? If this resonates with you, definitely try it out. We are all addicted to this instant gratification, most of us in Western society now. And it kind of keeps us stuck. It keeps so many people stuck. It's the reason why you see, whether it's your parents or your coworkers or just people around you who are living the same life that they were living 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's this lack of drive and this lack of action that we develop because we have no reason to take action. We have no reason to have drive when we're so intoxicated by this dopamine. We're so intoxicated by this pleasure. And that's why we stay stuck, and that's why we stay in the same cycles and same patterns for years and years and years, right? For many of us, not for many, but for many people, for sure, they go through this their whole lives. People are 50, 60, 70, even on their deathbeds, and they've done the same thing day in and day out for the last 50, 60 years. So if you've been feeling stuck, or you've been feeling like you really, really want to go do things with your life, you want to do something, you don't know quite what, and you can't find that drive, I highly, highly recommend that really take inventory of all the things that you're doing, the things that you're consuming, the things that you're really feeding yourself and your brain, and see if you're really a slave to your mind or not. So many of us are. We're so addicted and we become slaves to our minds. And if this is you, then, try a dopamine detox. Remove those instant gratifiers, replace them with natural dopamine, and see how your life changes. See how your life changes. I really hope that this resonated with you guys. I hope this helped. Dopamine detox has been one of the most pivotal things in my life that I've been implementing every few months. And, once again, thank you for tuning in. My name is Julia, and I'll see you guys soon.